Darn it, looks like we have more people on Zoom than I had thought. Hey, all of you out there who are on Zoom, I know some of you told me you were going to be out there, but let me know if that's the thing, because I could have potentially changed the schedule. Darn it, we've got 4 people out. I thought we just had 2. Oh boy. Hey, you folks who are out on Zoom right now, can you hear me okay? Can you turn your cameras on for a second so I can actually see you, and then turn your mute off so I can hear you? Are you guys all going to be back on Thursday? Oh, now you can't see me. There we go. What's the deal? Bryn, what's up? Are you going to be back on Thursday, or are you, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Oh, I still can't hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Totally.
Okay, cool. For some reason I thought that class was online today. Like, I don't know why. I just like really
no,
had
we're
it in my
doing a
head.
case study. We're all here.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I was like, but I can come. I just like really thought that class was online today.
Yeah.
For some reason.
Okay, great. So come on out. Hey, Jake, what's your situation?
I have COVID.
Are you
So I can't
quarantined or something?
Yeah.
Okay. And Hunter, I know your situation. Callie, I know yours. Anya, what's your situation? Oh, well, why do people think it was online? I don't get that.
Like a couple of references to Zoom in the case study.
Oh, okay. I see Anya's gone now. Okay. Okay, we're going to go ahead and I'm sort of debating, because I could, help me out here, guys. Are you guys who are online now, could you be here on Thursday? That's kind of my question, because I could potentially do a sudden reorientation of what we're doing, because obviously you can't really do a case remotely. Callie, Hunter, and Jake, would you be here on Thursday or not, based on your situation? That's the question.
I cannot be
Yes,
here.
you could. You're saying, Jake, yes?
No, I can't. I cannot.
You can't. Okay. Hunter. You guys need to unmute. I can't hear anything. Callie.
I won't be here Thursday.
You can be. Okay, we're just going to do the case today. Sorry. I mean, I could potentially do some, but okay. That's what it is. Yeah, we're just going to have to do this. Okay, I'm going to share my screen then. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Yeah, sorry. I mean, we did last year do this case study online, so I understand that there's a little confusion there, but okay, good that we're all here. Or everyone is here, could be here. Darn it, you guys aren't seeing my screen. Let's get this right. Share screen. Hello. That one. Yes. Do it. And okay. There we go. You guys online, you can see my screen, right? We're good?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to do a case study today. We were planning on today. I want to give a little bit of a sort of like short mini lecture to this, which is why I did make this available online and talk a bit about that. But I do want to very quickly mention a couple things, and maybe I won't go someplace else, and I'll just try to do this off the top of my head and probably forget a few things in the process. But most of the class has now finished their sort of student interviews, and that's great. That's good. You want to you should have technically. I know some people are a little bit delayed in getting their interviews scheduled, and you've been interacting with us. And please let Harriet and I know what's going on. We can help you out in trying to get things moving forward. Keep us posted on your progress. But you should be turning now towards giving each other feedback on your other group members' feedback on their stuff. And by the way, when people give you feedback, don't accept their comments because we want to be able to see people's comments in the feedback. So leave their comments in the file. But this is in part in preparation for conference number 2, which is happening this weekend. I think all groups are scheduled. I'm not sure about number 9. Group number 9. You guys are slow in responding. Hopefully, you've now firmed up a time with Harriet. If you have not, do so right away because we need to get these scheduled. Everyone else, I think, is scheduled and knows when their conferences are this weekend. But that conference is a time for you to sort of reflect on your experience, critique and talk about the things that you think are really working in other people's work, things that are achieving core communication principles, and then begin to plan for this next interview, which is sort of the culmination, the interview with the community members on the topics you're planning. To the extent possible, and we don't have all the interviews fully lined up yet, we have posted the information about your community interviewees online. So do make sure you look at those carefully. Think about questions that have to do with your topic in general, because for this one, we want you both thinking about what questions should all people in your group be asking that are common, that are sort of on your theme, but also, of course, you're each interviewing an individual, a human being, and you have some biographical information on them. And so if you have other questions, particularly that sort of relate the topic to their lived experience, those would be good to come up with. So this is a chance to sort of talk through that stuff this weekend. So that's an important thing. Another thing I wanted to mention too is that some of you were at the Careers in the Environment event that we had last Thursday evening and got quite a bit out of it. It's quite valuable to talk with alumni who've been out a few years, have careers focused on various aspects of the environment. Just a reminder that on the syllabus, there is a Careers in the Environment event as a part of this sort of first day week. This Thursday in the evening, it's on the syllabus, that focuses on media. Last week focused on renewable energy. This week is focusing on sort of the environment and media. So some interesting things that I encourage you to take advantage of. It was great to see some of you out at the wetland restoration this weekend. We had a very fun time with that event, and I'm still kind of tired from it, but so be it. All right. So any questions before we start in today? Yes.
I just had a question with feedback. Do you want us to, after we've gotten the feedback from peers, do we then edit?
Yeah, go ahead and feel free to edit your stuff, but leave comments in so we can see how people are giving each other feedback. But yeah, go ahead, take advantage of the feedback you're getting. Yeah, we want you to learn from each other. Yeah, Stan.
So I have to do my review on the phone, and so I like send the email in the appendix.
Right.
Started getting some feedback, so I haven't done it. So I just use the stock photos.
You can use stock photos, do the best you can to get photos, but you can use, when we say stock photos, what we mean is there's a description of how to get photos out of the Community Voices database. And specifically, there's a description of how to extract photos that have not already been used. So you really want to follow that procedure because we don't use the same photos twice. So don't just look through for any photo that you think is good, because a lot of the great photos have been used and so can't be used. There's a little box you check that says unpaired images. Everything I'm saying is described in that handout, and you want the unpaired images, images that are out there that haven't been used from our stuff. All right. Cool. Let's get going. So this is actually, I mean, every topic is my favorite topic, but I'm going to say it anyways. This is one of my favorite topics, which is talking about the role of technology as it mediates our relationship with the natural world. And I kind of love this case because it really gets into sort of the thick of this fundamental question about different kinds of technology and the extent to which different kinds of technology either foster or inhibit positive or negative relationships between humans and the natural world. And I think there's part of the reason I like the case so much and the topic so much is I think there is a tendency for us to think of particular technologies as good or bad technologies in terms of how they mediate that relationship with the environment. And I think objectively, there are aspects of technologies that are good and aspects of technologies that are bad. But I think a larger question that we sometimes fail to fully engage with in our sort of dialogue about humans and the environment is specifically how technology is used and how a certain technology could potentially be quite good in one context and quite bad in another context. We tend to sort of like want to label certain things, genetically modified crops, for instance, as just being fundamentally bad. And as I said in sort of prep for this, the readings for this are particularly important. The reading by Sinsheimer, the reading by Winner, who are two folks who've sort of thought and written deeply on the nature of technology and human relationships with technology. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time up front before we get into the case, trying to sort of flesh out some of these ideas. So we have talked about these sort of alternate perspectives on the nature of causality and ethics as we've gone through the course. So there's nothing up here that's new. These sort of different ways of thinking about people's interaction with the environment. I'm just sort of pointing out this is another kind of set of lenses one can look at human relationships. The tragedy of the commons has been a really critical way that people have thought about different humans and why they do what they do. But science and technology provides a sort of other lens for thinking about human relationships. And there are certain key assumptions that I kind of want to get out there before we get into the case about our relationship with technology, and particularly in sort of modern Western society, we do kind of operate with this notion that increased scientific knowledge is inevitable. We're always learning new things, and that for the most part, it's good to learn more about things. I mean, science, it's the search for new truths about the universe, and I think for many people, we think of it as this sort of value neutral search for truth, and more truth is good. The more truth we know about the way the world works, the better everything will be. And I think some people also kind of have that attitude about technology. We started the class, in fact, by talking about the sort of, I don't know if I referred to it this way, but a sort of cornucopian view of technology, in which this sort of assumption that many people operate with, which is that we have a lot of problems right now, and we will discover technologies that will solve those problems. We always have, we always will, some sort of technological breakthrough. And we've seen that happen with many things. We talked sort of briefly about chlorofluorocarbons that are destroying the ozone layer, and how we came up with different chemicals which are less damaging to the ozone layer, technological solution to that particular challenge. But for today, I really want to focus on a couple key questions. First is, to what extent does technology reflect, reinforce, or determine our relationship with each other and with the natural environment? So how is technology kind of reflecting, reinforcing, and determining our relationship with each other in the natural environment? And is additional scientific knowledge of things necessarily good for human relationships with each other and with our environment? These two questions kind of relate pretty strongly to the two central readings for today: the question of how technology mediates our relationship, and the question of whether always knowing more is always better in terms of how we interact with the environment. And Sinsheimer talks a bit about this, what he calls the certainty principle, but it's sort of based on sort of a counterpoint. Well, many of you are familiar with Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is really about electrons and stuff in shells, but it's been generalized to be this idea that when you observe something, the process of observing something fundamentally changes the thing that is being observed. Simply the act of looking at something changes the nature of that thing that you're looking at. And so he comes up with this sort of counterpoint, which is the certainty principle, which is once we know something, we are fundamentally changed by that knowledge. And so a central question that he's asking, is it always better to know about something? Is new knowledge always better, preferable than not knowing? And like I say, in science in general, we operate with this premise: more knowledge is always good. But at the same time, the decisions that people who are scientists make are determined very much by what funding is available for them to make to discover new knowledge. So, you know, people give you money as a researcher, you apply for funds and people give you money to study things, and people give you money, people being the US government, foundations, they give you money to do certain things. And that's really the central question of this case. Should we give this Indian researcher money to potentially discover new knowledge, which she purports, and several of the characters purport, is likely to help the Indian people in a variety of ways, or should we not give her money to do that? So that's kind of the central question of the case. Okay, so key distinctions regarding technology. So when we think about technology's effect on people and the environment, you know, one possible effect of technology on the environment is that the technology itself is having a direct effect on people and the environment. It's causing pollution, it's causing energy use, it's causing cruelty. You know, like you know, many of you are concerned about confined area feeding operations, CAFOs, these cages that they put animals in and pack them in really tight, and they have to feed them tons of antibiotics, and they live miserable lives. And you know, I think most people who have a conscience feel like it's pretty morally reprehensible what we do with these animals. So that technology, the confined area feeding lot, that technology for confining animals like that, you could argue, well, that's having a direct negative effect on people and animals, and it's a bad thing. It's having a negative direct effect. Fossil fuels, the internal combustion engine, it is inherently producing CO2 and other pollutants that are being released into the environment. That technology is having a direct negative effect on the environment, et cetera. Another, though, key thought is the relationships embodied in technology. How is the technology affecting how people interact with each other and how humans interact with the environment? Example from my perspective, I pulled out my phone the other day and talked about, what was the context I did that? I think I did that in this class. I talked about my phone and planned obsolescence. I have a memory of doing that. That was here, wasn't it? Yeah, right, okay. Ezra, you were up. So, right, so the phone, this mediates our relationship with the environment in a big way, in ways that I frankly find kind of alienating and reprehensible. I mean, it's got enough benefits that I feel like I need to have it, and I just feel sort of dependent on the thing now. But one thing I've really noticed on this campus over the last 15 years is people walking like this down the hallways through the natural environment. What's their experience with community and with the natural environment around them when they're walking around like that? None, right? So this device is facilitating a sort of alienation and separation between people and the community that they live in. I mean, maybe they're connecting with the community far away while they're doing that, but they're sure as heck, you know, especially as they're sort of bumping into me in stairways and stuff because they're not actually looking where they're going. They're definitely alienating me. They're not connecting with me in any way. They're interfering with people's ability to form spontaneous community, because instead of connecting with the people they're seeing and saying hello to them, they're sort of in their own little space separated from that. So that's not really the sort of like the technology embedded in the phone. That's not fossil. I mean, there are fossil fuels being released and using this thing, but and making it, but that's different. That has to do with the way the technology is mediating people's relationship with the environment around them, right? So it's a different effect. It's not a direct effect. It's an indirect effect on how people are experiencing and mediating the environment. Let's provide another example. Very common transportation vehicle, especially a little bit south of here. It's a photo of Amish person driving down the road in their buggy with their horse. That's my old car, what was totaled last summer. And a bunch of ES101 students doing the photo op with it a couple years back. That's my bicycle, which I gave myself a challenge when I arrived at Oberlin as a faculty member, just kind of a fun challenge. I said, I'm going to go into the bike co-op. I'm going to give myself 2 hours. I'm going to take bicycle parts that no one else would use for anything because they're so wrecked, and I'm going to put something together that I can ride. And I rode that for 3 years. It's still in my barn right now. It's every part of it is from a different bicycle, but gave myself a few hours, put that together, and that's what I rode for 3 years. So all these different parts, interchangeable, they could be put together in a variety of different ways. I want to talk about these three different ways of getting around the landscape: the bicycle, car, the buggy, and kind of consider these alternate transportation. Very quickly think about what environmental effects are associated with the manufacture, use, maintenance, and disposal of these technologies. How does each technology influence the way the user experiences the physical environment? And how is each technology influenced by, and how does it influence economic and social relationships? So those are the key questions here. And I'm going to give you, this is sort of a hyper mini case. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to chat with your nearest neighbor about these three questions right now. It's only 3 minutes, so go at it. Okay, I know I didn't give you enough time, but we're trying to do a fuller case study here. So I'm just trying to begin to get you really thinking about this nature of technology and what's embodied in technology. Let's start. Who wants to go on what environmental effects are associated with manufacture, maintenance? And maybe I'll call on people because that'd be a fun thing. Lyric, what were you guys talking about in terms of this first question, the environmental effects associated with manufacture, use, and maintenance and disposal of these things?
Well, the horse is already there anyway, so we thought about stuff there environmentally. I mean, all you have to do is care for the horse, but you would probably be getting it.
Right. So the horse is well, obviously it's an animal. It's eating food that's locally produced on the land. So its energy system is very local. It's running more or less on solar energy, what the Amish people grow on their farms. Presumably, a fair amount of its manure is probably going back onto the farm. So there's stuff being recycled. It's manufacturers really that they're raising these animals, and so the manufacturer is hyper local, and disposal, it's not to get too gruesome about it, but they're probably going to compost the thing when it's done, and it'll turn back into soil, and so it's pretty localized. Okay, Dan, what do you say on these other two technologies? Talk a little bit about their manufacture, use, and disposal.
Yeah, there's a lot of like metal in the car and the bike, and that was probably made with fossil fuel and the furnace. Probably same as the rubber. I'm not exactly sure how it's like made, but I'm pretty sure it involves like heat, like that sort of stuff. I mean, it obviously took like manpower to assemble the bike or machine. Well, yeah, you made it, so yeah, that was like pretty sustainable. But the car like went through like a factory that probably like machines out parts and stuff. So fossil fuels would go into like making materials and into like furnishing the parts of the car. The maintenance, like the electricity it uses, probably came from like And yeah, it's gonna leave you behind a lot of like trash. But
Yeah, so great things. Lots of, I mean, I'm personally all excited about electric cars. I think they're really cool. The car replaced that one with, that was a hybrid electric, is 100% electric. I'm really excited about that. You got batteries, you've got, mining of lithium for those batteries all over the world. A lot of that goes on in Congo. You got sort of disposal of that stuff when you're done. It is running on electricity, comes from someplace. That's being charged. That's a little lot adjacent to the public library. So it's charging on a free charging station in Oberlin. That's running. That is powered by 100% green energy, but nevertheless, it's energy that could be used for something else. Obviously you need to deal with disposing the whole thing. So there's a huge global manufacturing chain involved in that. A lot of issues, even for an electric car that's charged on that. Bike, obviously, as mentioned, all of the materials for that were created in factories someplace. It's pretty recyclable. So unlike the car, it can be taken apart and put back into different things. It could be recycled for a long, reused, not recycled, reused. The pieces and parts are very interchangeable on bikes. So they're pretty different, but so they're very, very different. Now let's think about how does the technology influence the way the user experiences the physical environment. Ava, what do you think on that one? How do you experience the environment in that cart?
You able to see the nature around you, able to like get a feel for it because you're not surrounded by anything. Like in a car, you're like almost trapped in it. If that
Sure.
makes sense.
You're isolated in it at any rate.
Like you're able to really experience and get a feel for what's around you.
Yeah, so really different sort of experiences in a bike in particular. If you're going up a hill, you're going up a hill because you're physically experiencing that hill. Obviously, both of those, you're much more in the environment, sensing the environment. They're both much slower vehicles. And so it's taking you more time to move through the environment. So you're much more sensitive to environmental conditions. You can kind of completely space out in the car. Notice if it's raining or sunny, but you might not even know what the temperature is outside because it's a temperature controlled space. So you're really not, there's nothing about that technology in the middle that is forcing you to sort of like confront and address the reality of nature. I mean, obviously if you're in a snowstorm, it's a little different than a car, but for the most part, you can drive the thing in most weather and you really don't necessarily think much. So it's really influencing the degree to which people are connecting with the environment. That's a much less connected experiencing. And then let's think a little bit about this this last one here. Henry, what do you think about this? What is your sense of how the technology is influenced by and influencing economic, political, and social relationships?
I would skip the buggy one and go straight to
Okay.
But I think cars allow people to cover long distances fairly quickly and can shorten the gap between people that live a long way.
So it's allowing in some ways for a spatially integrated economy. If people are getting around by car, you can live in Cleveland, work in Oberlin or whatever. You can go some distance without that, without being constrained in the way by environmental limitations in a way that, you obviously couldn't be going from Oberlin to Cleveland on either of those other two vehicles very easily. What about sort of, political and social relationships? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I know there's still a lot of talk about the gas prices and stuff like that.
Right. So that one at some level, and certainly in the manufacture of it, it's dependent on fossil fuels. But even with the electrical system, it's dependent on this whole grid infrastructure, major political, social infrastructure that needs to be in place for people to use that as a mode of getting around. So this one kind of requires a very sophisticated, developed political economy in a way that the other two do not. Make sense? Anyone else have any points on this last one? Yeah, go ahead.
Like social relationships, like I don't know, like when I'm back to my nana's house in like rural Pennsylvania, like just kind of seeing how people like perceive people in horse and buggies too. I feel like that's like a social relationship. It's like different kind of like pushing forward.
Yeah, people think about you really differently if you're driving around in a buggy, that sort of thing. But also your capacity to interact with each other. I mean, you know, presumably on the bike or the buggy, you're much more likely to kind of interact with other human beings in some sort of meaningful exchange than you are if you're isolated in your own little car. So a lot of things going on in these relationships. Again, I'm sort of priming you to sort of think about how technology is the inherent features of technology, but also, you know, how technology is applied. When we think about how technology may influence the social order, you know, the way technology influences social order is very much influenced by how it's applied in certain social economic settings. And again, this is very much comes from the Winner reading. But one important thing to understand about technology is how it's applied can have an enormous influence on human relationships with each other. And Winner talks extensively about Moses and transportation infrastructure in New York. And I'll ask for a volunteer on this one. Can anyone summarize some of the key aspects of how Robert Moses engineered New York infrastructure in ways that were explicitly designed to influence social relationships, and in particular to keep the social order? Brian.
I know that for access to like beaches along Island, made it so that there's the only way to access them would be through parkways, but you would need a personal vehicle, and they would not offer buses on parkways. And this was specifically done because people in minority communities would often take buses to like beaches, Long Island, and by making them parkway accessible only, he designed it so that only people who would have the means to afford their own car would be able to access the beaches. So he just made it so that like he restricted the social dynamic through his designing of the parkways.
The infrastructure, yeah, right. So I hope everyone read that first of all, and then heard what Brian said, because this is a very, very profound use of technology. And not because, so it's really about bridges fundamentally in terms of technology. You think about bridge. A bridge doesn't have inherent politics in it. You know, a bridge is a damn bridge. It's made out of concrete. Not so if you design bridges on parkways that are too low for buses to get under, and those parkways take people to certain recreational issues. One could argue that the bridge is designed as a technology is designed as an implement to promote racism and classism, because you are excluding, as Brian says, buses from access to public beaches. So basically what you got on beaches are people who have means to drive cars and not people who get around in buses, because the bridges, and this is infrastructure you install, and it's infrastructure that lasts for 100 years once you put this stuff in. So you don't think of a bridge as like, well, that's a technology that's doing one thing or another thing, but it is. You can design technologies, you can implement technologies in ways that fundamentally alter social relationships for decades or even centuries to come based on your particular motives. So very important to sort of think about these aspects of technology. The aspects, is it inherent in the technology? Is it the way the technology is applied? All of these things are really, really critical in thinking about how technology plays out. And then again, this idea that certain technologies by their very nature are inherently linked with certain types of social relationships, and that the initial choice of adoption is sort of decisive to consequences. And one example in this, in the alumni presentation last Thursday evening, chatting with one of the speakers, Ben Fram, beforehand, and they were thinking about what questions they might ask each other that would sort of get students engaged. And one comment that Ben said, well, if I want to get people excited and sort of like engaged in debate, I just need to bring up nuclear power, because everyone has a strong opinion on nuclear power. But let's think about nuclear versus solar. So, and about what the inherent politics of these things are. So solar technology, yeah, the manufacture of it requires centralization. You got factories to make solar cells. So there's an aspect of like, where does this stuff come from? But solar is inherently a decentralized technology. You need to install, sun is not concentrated. Sun falls over the entire landscape. So if you want to run an economy on solar, you need solar installed over broad areas of the landscape. Completely the antithesis of nuclear power, which is very concentrated. You build big nuclear power plants that produce lots of power in one location. Nuclear power solar's not that dangerous. I'm sure you could be electrocuted with solar. You know, that's a risk that you got to deal with. You can fall off roofs. So there's some danger involved. Usually those dangers involve individual people and accidents and that sort of stuff, as opposed to a nuclear facility, which A, could melt down because it's poorly operated. B, produces toxic materials that last for potentially thousands of years. And C, is highly vulnerable to terrorists. And I think we certainly saw that play out in Ukraine when the Russians took over the Chernobyl plant. You know, and Europe was worried about its future, depending on what happened there. So point is very different. And I don't want to get too negative on nuclear either, because there are many environmental folks who feel like nuclear is potentially a carbon-free source of energy. It has attributes that are really desirable. It can produce energy 24 hours a day. It doesn't have the intermittency that solar power has or wind power has. So there's some real reasons why many environmentalists feel like this may be a key part of our solution, but it does have different politics built into it. You need to have a centralized government that you trust to manage a large nuclear power plant without, you know, a lot of restrictions and ability to maintain security. Nuclear power is extraordinarily dangerous. So you need certain kinds of political infrastructure, stable political infrastructure in place for this to be something that is less dangerous. And so here's a quote from actually one of the founders of Earth Day, Dennis Hayes. The increased deployment of nuclear power facility must lead society towards authoritarianism. Indeed, safe reliance upon nuclear power as the principal source of energy may be possible only in a totalitarian state. Dispersed solar sources are more compatible with centralized technologies, with social equity, freedom, and cultural pluralism. This was written a long time ago, but it certainly does capture those dynamics. Now, again, I'm sort of painting this picture to get you to think about the technology. Like I say, there are many people who actually feel like maybe nuclear actually has a necessary future. Okay, I had a bunch of other stuff I wanted to talk about, but I'm not going to do that because I want to get into the case, having you think about things like drying your clothes on clotheslines. How does that sort of influence people's relationship with the natural world and the decisions that they make? Computers, how does that sort of fit into people thinking about things? I do want to say a word about the Green Revolution before we get into the case. So this was discussed a little bit in the readings, but the Green Revolution, particularly in the intro to the case study, important for you guys to understand the Green Revolution and a couple Green Revolutions. During World War II, we developed technologies for making munitions. Some of those munitions are really powerful fertilizers, ammonium nitrate in particular, very powerful, useful fertilizer for growing lots of food. We also developed all kinds of synthetic organic chemicals that turned out to be pretty good at killing insects. And so the first Green Revolution, which occurred after World War II, was we developed certain high yield uniform varieties of plants, and we developed fertilizers, irrigation, herbicides, and pesticides that really allowed us to fundamentally transform agriculture in ways we've talked about through mechanization and other things, and really produce tons and tons of food in the developed world. You know, for better or worse, a lot of the aspects of it have had pretty negative effects on the environment, but darn it, we produced a lot more food than we ever had in human history before, and increased human population substantially during this time. One might argue as a result of having so much more food, so much more easily available. So that's the first Green Revolution. The first Green Revolution, as I said, was mostly in developed countries. A second green revolution occurred more so in the developing countries, and that was also about developing crop that were specifically suited to this, also employing lots of chemicals, agricultural chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, to substantially increase food production in the world. And then we're kind of in the midst of what I would call the third green revolution, which is the revolution of genetic engineering, being able to sort of manipulate the genetic material in our plant to modify food production. And that kind of brings us to the case. So let me just set this up. It's set up in what you read for today, but just to review quickly. So we've got an Indian researcher who is proposing to develop new insect and salinity resistant crops for peas and for rice, and is applying for money to do this. And your job in this is to represent these four characters here, but to really get into this issue about what is the nature of the technology in this particular application. And I really want to stress that, because many people come into this course with a generally negative view towards GMO. And some of the characters have that view too, but I want you to, after having occupied your positions, to take a step back and try to think about how it's being applied in this situation, as opposed to the inherent politics that you might feel is within that. So what's the nature of the technology in this particular application? What is the weight of evidence supporting the application? How might decisions affect economic, social, political, and environmental relationships among people? And at the end of the day, you guys are going to think about, is this something that should be funded, and make a recommendation about whether it should be funded. Yeah.
Which group member for this one is
I think I specified that, but I don't remember. What have people done so far? I can't remember what letters we have. What's that?
A and C be the
A and C have done it. So let's have B do this one. Sound good? It doesn't really make much difference. You're gonna, once we've gone through this case, you're gonna take a step back and imagine yourself being a board member of the McKnight Foundation. And as a board member, you're gonna weigh all of the evidence. So regardless of what character you represent. So it doesn't matter what B character is. When you write it up, you're looking at this situation. Hey, let me finish what I'm saying, and then you guys can talk. As a board member of the McKnight Foundation, which is what you want to, which is the angle you want to take on this, you want to consider all these positions and then make a judgment based on that. So it doesn't matter which character you played. You're not writing it from the perspective of character B, is what I'm saying. Okay, so let's I don't know why that's showing up. Okay, so we're immediately going to break into our different groups. And let me, how many groups are missing members? You guys are missing a member. Who are we missing in your group? What letter? C. Who else is missing members? And what are you guys missing? You guys are missing C. Okay. I'm going to be C, and let's have both of these groups, not this second, but let's have both of these groups in near proximity to each other so I can be C. What are we missing? What are we missing in your group? B. Okay, cool. I'm going to be B and C. I love playing all of these parts. They're very fun. So I am B and C. Am I anyone else? What am I for you guys?
We're missing D.
You're missing B.
D.
D. Okay, I'm going to be D. So I'll just, as we go through the characters, yes?
D, and I'm the only one here.
And these guys are missing D. We've got a partnership here. Okay. You're with these guys. Okay, so you're just going to join them and work with them. Okay. Okay, that's perfect. So I'm only, what am I being? What am I again? I'm B and C. I'm B and C. Okay, cool. Okay. A, B, C, D. Get together in your home group. Spend a couple of minutes talking about your character's position. We're a little, I talked about other things for a while, so we're going to be a little bit tighter on timing, but your job right now in your main group is to talk about what are the key points, what are the key arguments of your stakeholder that you're going to present back to your group. This is going to be very similar to the wetland wetland case in terms of how we run it. So as quickly as possible, try to really get into your character, figure out what their arguments are, and figure out how you're going to present those to your group. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do that. So get yourself comfortable, sit down, talk about what's their key role. And by the way, if I did print up a couple extra copy of character positions, so if you want to grab one here, that's A, B, C, and D there, if you want to grab one. So if anyone feels like they want to look at the sheet, you can grab one. Get yourselves comfortable and start talking. You got 5 minutes. A, B, C, D.
I think that's like that's one of our main, like I said, the population is they all have these daughters growing. Like the importance of a country being able to feed itself on its own land, and then that run out of agricultural new space to expand agriculture and the impact on the maybe trying to more stuff. So yeah, from in areas that
it's not like one standard state. So I thought that was like somewhat convincing.
Yeah, they were talking about like they want money to develop their own genetically modified crops and not money to buy genetically modified crops. It's kind of such self-sustaining. And she says that in developing humans are sustainable by language, but it's totally the world that actually ends up being necessary. Large companies. Yeah.
it's funny. Yeah, 20% of crops drop.
There's also, it also talks about how all the like have been totally toxic. So it's labeled as like the low labor. So.
And that those aren't necessarily costs, it's just flashy. And then I think also like another key point is the arguments the whole like idea that like 100% safety cannot and that this is not an area where the risk of waiting is
Okay, you guys need to wrap, so make sure you're getting the really central points that you need to communicate. Think about, because you're not going to have much time to present to your larger group, so think about what are the central points that your character needs to make to get their view across. All right, we're going to go ahead and get back in our groups. And there were two groups that I wanted to be together. Why don't you guys come up here who were both doing, what was it, B? Is that right? I can't remember, but I need both of those groups near each other so I can be B. But get yourselves back in a comfortable spot where you can interact well with each other. If it's on the side, that's great. Someplace where your group members can talk to each other. And so this is what we're doing. It's just like the wetland case where each of the different stakeholders is going to have a few minutes to present their views to the rest of the group. You're going to have 3 minutes to do that, and then a couple minutes for Q&A, and I'll do timing of these things, and then we're going to move on to the next one. So you got to be really concise in making your points, and the rest of you are going to want to listen really carefully. Okay. Get yourself settled, and I'll tell you when to go. So sit down, get yourself settled, and okay. You guys don't necessarily need to be one. You only need to be one group when you're doing. Are you guys? Is it C you're missing or B? I would be separate until. Yeah, be separate until. Let me just move a little bit away. Be separate until you do. Until we need to C. Sound good? Okay, get going here.
Okay, you guys should be switching your questions around now. Because I was gonna wrap up. Questions
Essentially,
All right, guys, we're gonna switch to B, the pro-environmental, pro-TMO
I think I just say.
yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
All right, we're moving on to C now. All right, so we're all one group now. And I'm an ecologist by background, and one of the key points I want to get across is a principle of unintended consequences. And that is many times when technologies are applied, we don't know what the negative implications are, and it's difficult for us to understand the negative implications. And so I think it's very important to be extraordinarily cautious about introducing something new that hasn't existed before into the environment. You just look at the whole ozone layer, which is produced, we create this benign chemical called chlorofluorocarbons that no one thought could damage anything. There's no toxicity. It's perfect chemical and wonderful refrigerant. And then years later, we discovered it's just an ozone hole. You know, radiation that's causing skin cancer. We have no idea that technology out there. And I just think we need to, whenever we're considering a new technology environment, we need to be a lot more cautious. There's lots of examples of situations where we've seen with the application of GMO crops already that GMO crops are applied in the United States. We've seen it sometimes. These genes can spread, creating super weeds. You create a gene that is resistant for you target to the gene that makes the plant resistant to Roundup or commonly used herbicide. And it's still growing in the ground until all the weeds. Well, that gene has actually gotten into wheat plants. So you have these wheat plants now that are resistant to that herbicide. So, my concern is that we need to be very, very cautious about applying these sorts of things. If an Ignite Foundation decides to move forward with this, I would just say that let's make sure that we do some planning in this endeavor that to minimize these risks. I'm opposed to this. Let's make sure we're doing lots of trials so we can make sure before we have this widely out there, all right, questions for C now. Questions for C. Well, I mean, I think there's definitely something migrated to other things that potentially satisfy the person. It's a great example of, we don't know. We don't know. Undermine my I just feel like flora and stuff. With this, we are just trying to minimize when we have GMOs are going to be limited to a space where we can like stop them from if we it's only not to do something is a decision to do what you're already doing. But to me, that's really finding the assumption that, well, just because we're what we're doing, well, what are we doing? It's not like saying we couldn't do this new thing if necessarily saying that thing is great because the alternative is what's going on now. But I feel like stronger. I do feel like my character is very legitimate. And absorb. You don't know necessarily how to take
It's recognizing that one really central aspect of my argument is where's the burden? Who's the burden on proving that a thing is good or bad? And I think this is definitely one of the challenges with these large mega corporations, which is outside of context. Because who's responsible for the bad things that happen? Is it the owner? And I think the same thing can kind of be true here. Who's taking responsibility? What's the insurance? What's the context we're creating that ensures that when things go wrong, there's some mechanism for addressing it? Because historically, the people who created the chloroform were not the people who had to pay the price of that. The people who were making gasoline were not the people who infants in poor communities who paid that price. So it's like the people taking the risk are not the people bearing the price of that. It's really about that. All right, we're going to move on to our last character here, D.
Okay.
The whole idea of having a corporation different environment is like it's really outsourcing. When it comes to political sense, there's a lot of control that they have local farms. And these things are going to be attractive to increase yield and stuff. Increasing their population. Also, these GMO crops are like greens and they have enough the main problem is many billion dollars and living on rice and grains doesn't suffice for I don't think you can do that. So this implementation of those crops isn't going to benefit the population. Another factor
Most agricultural.
be able to feed the population. I know that's what the special problem inequality rather than needing a scientific and also using more crop rotation and natural crops.
All right, we're moving to questions now. If you haven't already done that, questions for Dr. G.
Also another problem. Implementation CMOs and that's another.
Okay, stop everyone. And here we're doing a switch. We're doing a switch. So I love you guys are still talking, but stop. Here's the deal now. Let go of your character. Let them slip from you. You are no longer in your character. Feel yourself gently shifting positions. You are now a member of the McKnight Foundation. You are on their board, and it's your responsibility now, each one of you's responsibility, to think about these views you've heard and to come up with some sort of a recommendation on should we fund this thing or not. If we do fund this enterprise, are there particular stipulations we would like to insert to address some of the concerns expressed? So you are now a member of the foundation. You are no longer your character. You've listened to the character's position, and you are now trying to figure out what should we do? How can we do something positive here? So go. And you got to, I want to have a couple minutes for discussion at the end. So you got about 4 minutes to just talk about where can you guys come together in this? Again, you are not in your character anymore. You've heard the characters. You're now a member of the board trying to decide, do we fund this? If we do fund it, what stipulations do we want? Go. All right, another minute to think about it, and then I want to talk about it a little bit. So see if you can think a little bit about what you'd want to say about this.
So they have to have something that they would gain from showing it. Even if they like, if it fails, they would still give up us the full population.
All right, we only have a couple minutes left, so I just want to get some ideas out. So I'm going to ask really any group who wants to say, do you think we should fund or not, with a little bit of explanation of why and maybe stipulations. And David, maybe I'll hit you up first. Go ahead. Why don't you summarize your group? What's your group thinking about?
Yeah, we think we will fund it on the grounds that India needs food, obviously, and they need to sustain their population within themselves, and they don't need to rely on other countries to supply them with food. But we're saying that more research needs to go into possible downsides of GMOs, and more research needs to be done, just like to experiment with them in the field. And
So had you gotten as far as thinking about how you might execute a program that would exercise some higher degree of caution that I hear you talking about here? Austin, you want to?
I mean, yeah, like we discussed briefly, like potentially like conducting research to see like the effects on like other plants that haven't been genetically modified, that like in India. And then we also, like, just kind of adding on, we also talked about like the environmental impacts of like less because I was being with my argument is essentially that pesticides and stuff lead to a lot of carbon footprint, and that would be basically eliminated with genetically modified. So.
Okay, good. Annika, what did your group talk about?
We had a similar idea that we did want to fund the GMO project, because the situation in India, they need food. And even if we did have some precautions about like long-term effects of GMOs, because we don't really know what's going to happen with some. And I was C, so I really specialized in that, because C brought up like a lot of examples where like chemicals were implemented in homes, and then it turned out like 30 years later that they were super harmful. And there also are concerns with GMOs, like migrating and like infecting with pets. So we just wanted to make sure that like the long-term effects of GMOs and like how we're implementing the GMOs are going to be super researched. And we also wanted to add that like one company can't like buy out like the program.
So thinking about structuring your response in a way that ensures that the politics as well as the ecology are addressed. All right, unfortunately, we're more or less out of time, but think deeply as you go through this. If you do have stipulations about, get specific with those stipulations. How are you addressing these concerns? So great, fun time, guys.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know how much of those of you online got any of that, probably not much, but good to see you, and hope you guys get better and are here as soon as possible.
Sounds good, thank you.
I would say, but you have had contact. Just let me just bail from this so I'm not recording what we're doing now. Let's see. Stop. And